Africa is critical to Beijing because of its natural resources, huge consumer market, and geographical location. A total of 46 sub-Saharan ports are affiliated with China through financial, construction, or operational involvement. China switched investment focus in Africa from oil to minerals. What are the African countries Beijing has strategic interests in? Hello everyone, welcome to my show. I'm Lei. I made a video on China's influence on Africa and the approaches the communist regime took to influence African elites. In this video, I'll take a deeper dive to look at China's footprint in Africa and the countries that Beijing has a strategic interest in. The Democratic Republic of Congo is a Central African country rich in non-ferrous metals, rare metals, and non-metallic minerals. Cobalt is the most indispensable raw material needed for lithium batteries. Congo has half of the world's cobalt ore reserves and is the largest exporter of cobalt ore. Beijing has invested heavily in Congo. In January of this year, China signed the One Belt, One Road agreement with the country and canceled its $28 million interest-free loan that was due last year. It also pledged support for Congo to chair the African Union next year. China now has 72% of the global cobalt refining capacity. Foreign Policy magazine mentioned in 2019 that Chinese companies had bought 40 to 50% of Congo's cobalt production. Of the 14 largest cobalt mines in Congo, 8 of them are in the hands of Beijing. Guinea, located in West Africa, is rich in natural resources and its aluminum ore reserves rank first in the world. Based on data by Marex, in 2020, China imported 112 million tons of bauxite, of which nearly half came from Guinea. Of the 82 million tons of bauxite that Guinea exports, nearly two-thirds go to China. Other than bauxite, China is also interested in Guinea's iron ore. The Simandou iron ore mine is currently the world's largest, highest quality, underdeveloped iron ore reserve. In 1997, the Anglo-Australian Rio Tinto Group obtained the prospecting rights to Simandou, and in 2006 won the mining rights. Of the 4 mining zones in Simandou, the mining rights of 2 of them are jointly owned by the government of Guinea, which holds 15%. The Rio Tinto Group, which owns 45%, and China Aluminum owns 40%. By the way, China Aluminum also owns 10% of Rio Tinto. The remaining 2 zones were obtained after great efforts by a consortium of Chinese companies in 2019, with 85% ownership. The Guinea government holds the other 15%. This makes the Chinese regime the biggest shareholder of Guinea's Simandou reserves. China's interests in Congo and Guinea are driven by their rich natural resources, but things aren't going so well for Beijing right now with regard to these 2 countries. This past August, a military coup took place in Guinea, ousting President Alpha Conde, a very close ally of Beijing. So the future of these large Chinese investments in Guinea is now uncertain. In the same month, the Congolese government canceled the licenses of 9 gold mining companies on the grounds of illegal mining and pollution, of which 6 were Chinese. 1 month later, in September, the president of Congo asked his government to review the mining contracts signed by his predecessor with Beijing in 2008. Seychelles is an island country that consists of 115 islands, located on the Indian Ocean northeast of Madagascar. Beijing has provided substantial assistance to the country since 1977. Seychelles invited China to set up a military base on Mahe Island in 2011. But Beijing finally chose Djibouti for a military base. Beijing donated 2 Yun-12 aircraft to the Seychelles government. In December 2011, China's Minister of Defense visited the country. Seychelles soon announced that it would provide logistical supplies to Chinese naval vessels carrying out missions in the Indian Ocean. The Republic of Djibouti is the smallest mainland African country with a population of 900,000, but it's an important country strategically located next to the narrow Monday Strait, the water corridor connecting the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, and the Indian Ocean. It's the only way to enter the Suez Canal. At present, the United States has 4,000 troops in the country. Camp Lemonnier is the largest U.S. military base in East Africa. France and Japan also has military bases in Djibouti. China's military base, located just 7 kilometers or 4 miles from the U.S. base, started operation in 2017 and has about 2,000 military personnel. The West had a strong influence on Djibouti until Beijing built the first electric railway on the continent that connects Ethiopia's capital to Djibouti. Since the opening of the railway, total trade volume in Djibouti port has skyrocketed. This has made its government very pro-China. It canceled the port operation rights of a UAE company over commercial disputes and gave them to a Chinese company. Egypt was the first Middle Eastern and African country to establish diplomatic relations with China in 1956. President Hosni Mubarak was one of the first foreign leaders to visit Beijing after the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. After Mubarak stepped down in 2011 after 30 years, the country changed leaders 4 times in the next 10 years. However, Sino-Egypt relations have not been affected by the fast changes of power and are further nurtured under current President el-Sisi. He has made 6 trips to Beijing since becoming president in 2014. Being the hub of Africa, Europe, and Asia, Egypt's geographic location is very important. For China, the Suez Canal is a crucial linchpin in transporting goods to Europe. Using Route A, the Red Line, via the Suez Canal can reduce the shipping time from China to Europe by 7 days, when compared with Route B in purple. The Chinese state-owned conglomerate TIDA is the biggest investor in the Suez Canal industrial zone near the city of Ain Sokhna. The Chinese port company Hutchison has won contracts to manage the Egyptian ports of Alexandria and El Dikila. Seychelles, Djibouti, and Egypt are important to China because of their strategic location. There are 2 other countries that are important to China because of historical ties and ideological similarity. 1 week after becoming the president of China in March 2013, Xi Jinping visited Africa, and the first stop was Tanzania. Back in the 1970s, after the Soviet Union, the UN, and the United States declined to fund the Tanzan Railway, Beijing helped build it. It's the CCP's first project in Africa. The railway has enabled Dar es Salaam to flourish as one of Africa's major port cities. China still uses the railway today as a major route for transporting natural resources from inland to the coast. The port has been growing at 10% annually since 2003 and is now congested. The 2 countries had been in talks to negotiate the expansion of the port until the former Tanzanian president John Magufuli stopped the negotiation in 2019 and called the terms the Chinese side proposed exploitative. Magufuli passed away this March. His vice president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, who is now president, is resuming talks with China for a $10 billion port project. Ethiopia established diplomatic relations with China in 1970 and has been learning from the CCP's socialist development model. In fact, Ethiopia is nicknamed the Chinese state in Africa. In the capital city, Addis Ababa, Beijing built a $475 million light railway system, the $200 million African Union headquarters, industrial parks, roads, skyscrapers, and housing projects. CNN called Addis Ababa the city that China built. However, Beijing's efforts to expand influence in Ethiopia by bankrolling infrastructure are undermined by the rising tensions between Ethiopian ethnic groups. Last November, Ethiopian Prime Minister declared war on the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF, the ruling party of the Tigray region. He accused the TPLF of attacking an Ethiopian military base. The tensions between the TPLF-led local government and Ethiopia's central government may cost China its investments. Chinese citizens have asked where all the money their government spent around the world came from. How could Beijing have unlimited amount of money to spend? Those are good questions. I'll make a video to explain just that. You can watch my previous video on Africa. Stay tuned, and I'll see you next time.